How's it going, everybody? So, this weekend was the Kansas Materia Cup, and my desk is a mess. I've got dice in the way for my mat. And I made Top Cut, and you all are probably wondering, why has Google not uploaded a video in a while? And the reason is I've been really trying to keep a lot of the bits and pieces of this deck under wraps, except for with my playtest partners and local people that I played the deck with. Just didn't really want to get things out there on a lot of this. So like even the 2-deck tourney, if you looked on FF decks, there was an Ice Earth and an Ice Wind list on there under my name on the event that I won with the 2-deck that we post deck lists for. And I did not play this deck there. So this is probably the deck that I think is the best deck in the game currently, and it's the deck that I'm probably happiest with since the list that I played at the re-raise. So let's get started. First things first, we have our Warrior of Light. Warrior of Light is a card that is just leagues better than I thought this card was going to be. I kind of saw like big beat stick 10k free, and I didn't put together what that actually meant. And the big thing is this is the best anti-aggro card in the game. If you control this, aggro can't kill you, which gives time for some very strong scaling decks as long as they can play this card consistently. And it's a payload in those decks because it's free and draws and has this big action ability. It's very good. And if you're actually casting it, you have the ability to do any card that's fire, wind, earth, and water. This deck is focused on earth and water so that I can play 3 copies of Une. Une is the card that I thought was the strongest legend when they were all revealed. Une is essentially half of a Leviathan with a cost reduction if you can remove some summons from the break zone, and you can tap her to get a summon back once per turn. Only once per turn. However, that does not say only during your turn. Enter the card that binds this entire deck together and makes this the deck that I think is the strongest deck in the game. It is a singular copy of 4CP starter deck Rosa. This is a card that I've always thought had a lot of potential, but I thought it was potential in meme decks. I wanted to play her with something like Vanille or Sarah Mobius, where you would do the effect to cancel the auto, they would pay the tax, Rosa would then reactivate the forward, and you would tax the auto again, right? Basically make them pay 4 for everything they do. Unfortunately, there's not really a great color combination that gives Rosa the ability to do that, but the difference between a Warrior of Light that can ping twice and do 10k and still block versus one that does 5 and gives up the ability to block, and an Une that gets a summon back every single turn is game determinative. Rosa just, if Une untaps and you get a Rosa on the field, or if you get Warrior of Light Rosa, the game is effectively over. The other really nice thing about Warrior of Light is because you're running all these rainbow cards and you have water, you can play 2 copies of Fusoya. And Fusoya is really strong. Even the first 2 modes turn him into a 1 CP 8k that gets you back the best summon in your break zone and cycles a dead card out of your hand, right? As long as you're able to get 3 colors with them. And it's not uncommon for you to get all 5. In fact, there are a lot of situations where you get all 5 and choose Fusoya himself to go to the top of your own deck, at which point you can do it again next turn. In fact, that is the Exodia state in the mirror match, is you get to the point where your opponent can never keep cards down because Fusoya will continuously bounce whatever card they play and put himself on top of the deck to do it again next turn. And this is when I think this deck really started diverging from what I thought would happen. So there was a deck list in Japan that came out from the Kobe tournament that was won by a mono win player. So I played the mono win list a little bit, and it was fine. It played a lot like mono wind, and I've said it before. I'm a really bad mono wind pilot. So many years of Earthwind with Fiona have just poisoned my brain. I struggle to do well on mono wind. It's a deck that I need a lot of practice on to play well. I think it's incredibly slept on. I think it's a top deck. I think it's a deck that people should be playing and aren't, and I can't tell you why. But I knew it wasn't really an option for me at this event. So I started looking elsewhere, and that list came out, and it was on these, and because it was on those, it was on Forward Rydia. This is a card that I thought was going to die when the backup came out. So she was exceptionally weak last format. Like, last format, they printed Kryl and Echidna, which seemed like they should be just astronomical buffs to Rydia. Cards that makes Rydia Turbo into the best deck in the game. And no Rydia Turbo was seen, and the reason why is because Rydia can't function in a format with that much removal. And the wild thing about this deck is Warrior of Light and Une are so difficult to remove, especially when paired with a Rosa. Rydia gets to stick around a lot longer than you would expect, especially when the format has to be very damage heavy to deal with 13, because 13 plays lots of large bodies. So a lot of outright break effects are kind of disappearing from the meta to deal with 13, and that's where Rydia starts to really shine. And lastly, when we're on Rydia, you've got to pair her up with her best friend. 3 copies of Porum, 1 EX, 2 Legends. I know a lot of players are on the EX, which is still very good. I opted to go with the Legend just because I wanted more threat generation. I wanted a card that my opponent was forced to deal with at all times. If they didn't kill Warrior of Light was going to run them down and kill them. They don't deal with Une is going to draw me 2 cards every turn. They don't deal with Rydia, I'm going to drown them in card advantage with summons. You don't deal with this Porum, you no longer have activated abilities on the field. The other really nice thing about this Porum, though, is how she interacts in the mirror. Porum is able to turn off Warrior of Light to get rid of First Strike, able to turn off Rydia to where start of every turn, if you have a Porum and your opponent has a Rydia, you can go Porum, choose your Rydia. They must fire the Rydia effect then and there, or it's over. If they try to do something else on their turn, and there's an auto ability that fires off, you can do Porum, choose Rydia. They play the Rydia. Rydia gets the ability to get the 2 counters. Porum, choose Rydia. Rydia cannot cast a summon that turn. You start to really just starve out any abilities like that. She also provides an out to a really problematic card for the deck, which is General Leo. This deck is on 17-ish summons, if I remember correctly. For the exact number, let me double check that real quick. But because you're on such a high summon count, you really don't want to be locked in Leo. I'm on 16 summons and 19 forwards. So we have this really, really nice core. We've got Rydia, we've got our 3 Porums, we've got Fusoya, Rosa. Fusoya does a really good job of recycling these. It's very easy for us to maintain a Rydia powered up. And the other nice thing is Rydia is also a decent anti-aggro card. She's hard to remove, and she threatens a lot of summons that aggro does not want to deal with. What this means, you'll notice we're on a lot of water cards. You bet it. It's the Broken Summon. This card is completely degenerate, completely toxic, and has no right to be in the game. I do not think this card can be printed. You cannot print search 2 characters on a card and have it function. The wild thing about this card is this plus any even costed backup means that I have all 4 colors for Warrior of Light at the end of turn 2 if I'm willing to dump my whole hand. Which I'm willing to do sometimes. I've done that against 13 where I don't have a better play, and I'll go back up turn 1, they'll play their board, I'll go Sildra, play the 4 colors, get Warrior of Light up next turn, give myself a chance to handle the aggro. And I've literally raced 13 with this deck and won because of how powerful Sildra is at setting up my backups. Let's go over those backups real quick. 3 copies of Sarah. Needs no introduction. The 1 copy of Princess Sarah to search with it. Princess Sarah in this deck is almost always declared wind unless she gets bounced after your setup. If you already have a Tyro around field, you can declare her earth or water potentially to help maintain your setup. Usually you would declare earth, but there are situations where you'll declare her water later on as well. The best backup in the deck, 3 copies of Class 4th Moogle. 1 copy of Geomancer, and 1 copy of Kryl as searchable Earth backups. And then 1 copy of Kate Sith 11 as just a little bit of extra rainbow backup and a way to recur it. But if you have Sildra, let's say I take my Sildra, and let's say I have a Sarah. Sarah represents Princess Sarah. I get Kryl and Class 4th, and my colors are fixed. If I have Class 4th, I can get Sarah and the Geomancer. and the colors are fixed. Likewise, I can go, if I have Kryl, I can go Sarah, class 4th. Or if it's Geomancer, Sarah, class 4th. So no matter what combination of 2 backups I have to start, or backup I have plus Sildra, I always have my colors, which is really, really important. Makes this deck incredibly strong. Lastly, we're on 3 copies of Tyro and 2 copies of Shantoto. There's not much to say about these. They do what they've done since the dawn of time immemorial, which is help you color fix and help you survive. Lastly, we've got 2 tech slots that are unrelated to other cards, so they're going to go here. 1 copy of Orin. This is a magnet that protects Rydia. It's intended to help with a rather Ice Lightning matchup by forcing all targets onto himself. He's also a mirror breaker. If your opponent has Warrior of Light plus Rosa and you're on damage 3, Warrior of Light, or Orin solos Warrior of Light because Warrior of Light can't actually ping him down. Rosa has to target him with a reactivation effect. So you can't double ping Orin, which means that the rest of my forwards are safe for the rest of the turn. And 1 copy of Garnet. It's the only 3 cost forward in the deck, so being Sildra searchable summon recursion tends to be really nice. Definitely there are times where you want to kind of deck thin, so you'll go like Rydia, free cast Sildra, get Garnet, and like a dead backup like the Geomancer. Tap a backup, pitch the dead backup, play the Garnet, get back the Sildra, and then go again next turn. So the last set of cards that have dependencies, and I saw a lot of players not on this package, is I'm on 2 copies of Fenrir. So if you haven't played this matchup, particularly the mirror, it's incredibly scaled. It's actually, I think, one of the most fun mirror matches I've ever seen in a TCG. I was playing a local player, Kyle McGinty, and we were both on this deck, and they were laughing. Like everybody watching us play was like, they were mesmerized. They were like, "This is like some of the wildest stuff I've seen," and also they're like, "This is like watching high-level chess. Like you guys are just attacking each other's resources so efficiently and so powerfully, but you're both able to like continuously counterswing." Fenrir was phenomenal all weekend. I broke so many Sarahs. This card got me into top cuts single-handedly. I truly believe this is one of the best cards you can play. Importantly, if Fenrir has 2 modes live, it is probably the most powerful summon in the game. I genuinely believe if you can do both of the modes, the CP efficiency of this card is insane. Breaking a backup costs about 3. Reviving a 2-cost forward costs 4. This is a 7 CP summon for 5. Breaking a light forward costs about 3 CP. This does it for that. Incidentally, revives as something else. It's about a 7 CP worth of value tied in a 5 CP card. That's also usable at instant speed too. It's also incidental monster hate, which the deck would lack otherwise. Like, it's just so good. And lastly, we've got, of course, the one Sophie. We're in Earth Water after all. Fenrir can revive this. It can revive the Rydia, or maybe the card that I think was the most slept on. Sarah Mobius, I think, is a card that has aged better than Sophie. Particularly when you can revive her at instant speed using the Fenrir. I was using this as effectively... One thing this deck can lack is hard removal. There's a lot of bounce, a lot of ways to get forwards off the field, but there's not a lot of ways to keep them off the field and into the break zone outside of Warrior of Light. Sarah Mobius is the card that lets you put the opponents forward into the break zone by forcing a fight. And if she doesn't force a fight, she draws a card. The versatility in this card is really, really valuable, especially when it's searchable Earth CP off of a Sarah. Oftentimes, if I already draw the Princess Sarah and I have the Sarah, I'll just search this even with the dead Sarahs in the deck, just to keep my Fenrir alive for a later turn. Being able to turn Fenrir into a Hecaton Shear that also revives a forward is really good. And lastly, we have a lot of summons, so we're going to go through these one by one. We have 1 copy of Azura. This is just a nice neutral thing to cast off of Rydia. You can go Rydia, cast Azura, get back Porum, play the Porum. Rydia's now at 4 counters when the Porum dies. Get back the Azura, do it all over again. Helps against Ice Lightning, protecting your backups, things like that. 2 copies of Kusith. This lets us spoof a higher forward count. 2 copies of Amaterasu. If you're on Rydia, you are on some number of this. Usually you would want to be on 3, but in this deck, generally space is so tight that 2 felt about right. 2 copies of Mist Dragon. Having access to this on demand is extremely good, especially factoring in some really silly interactions between Rosa and this card. So you can go. At one point, I've had Rydia, Rosa, Une, but been out-tempoed by my opponent where they had, 7 forwards on the field. And I went, Rydia, free cast Mist Dragon, target the Une. Rosa, target Une, activate Une, and then Une effectively faded the entire battle phase by herself. Really, really strong combination. The utility's great. Removing break zones wins against water by itself. Preventing damage can keep you alive against a board clear at the wrong time. Canceling other summons like other opposing Sildras wins you the game. Protecting from Heka. Ixion can be a problem. Mist Dragon answers all of that very well. And lastly, we have 2 copies of 5 CP Heka. You need something to handle 13. This is the best way to handle it. Again, I've used this in combination with Mist Dragon to cast this without losing any of my own forwards. Since the Une and the Warrior of Light are also bigger than this, there are times that you can go like play Warrior of Light and then Heka to clear the board while keeping the Warrior of Light on field as a defensive measure. Lastly, 2 copies of 6 CP Leviathan. For a long time, this was Remora. But it turns out just extra copies of all your forwards is probably worth the downside of the bounce being worse than the power reduction. And that's the list. It was really, really good. Thank you so much to everybody that came up to me and said hi, wanted to chat. I had so many people say that they listened to me on their videos and talked about how they would listen to me on their TVs, and I'm truly humbled, y'all. Seriously, thanks. I can't even fathom. It's been really cool to see all the support. I posted the profile, the picture of my deck on the community tab on YouTube, and I think it got 18 likes out of nowhere, so people were excited for me, which was awesome. And the deck is just super fun to play. So matchups, let me pull this up real quick so that I can kind of talk through what my tournament looked like. Go ahead and scroll to my little tournament report. So round 1, I'm sorry, I don't remember any names. I'm going to start outside of a couple of these, I don't remember names. So Water Lightning 13. It's a really interesting deck. It was a hybrid of what I call mono lightnings to be funny, but a lot of people will call it Army of One. It was a hybrid of that and 13 aggro. So it was on the light lightning. I think it's actually a lot of potential for that list. I'd be really curious to help develop that with the pilot of that list. Things like the 2CP Ultros are actually category 13. And if you could use that to mill a bunch of Odins and Lightnings to fuel the 2CP Legend from last set, I think that could be really, really potent, actually. I think it's a deck that's got a lot of interesting applications. And I'd be curious to see what that looks like if it was actually optimized. I think 13... people have obviously settled on Fire Lightning as the best combination and things you can be doing in that, but I think there's a lot of potential for other variants. Fire Ice I think is still just as good as it was when I was testing it last set. I think Fire Wind has a lot of potential out of nowhere due to the combination of Hope. The Null is one of the funniest cards of the deck because it attacks and then disappears, so you don't have to worry about any shenanigans with your first attack. You just get the free buff and start drawing from there. And hilariously, in Opus 16, there was a 3CP Chocobo that is a standard unit category 13 that, when it dies, adds a character of cost 2 back. That card is searchable 8 ways from Sunday and would fit right in. If they board wipe you, you can just get your Lightning back and try again next turn, or your Fang back. You can go Fang, pay 1, or cost reduction, pay 1 Chocobo, and if they answer it, you get your Fang back. I think that's a really, really toxic loop that would be really difficult to answer. I think 13 is not just powerful, but very underexplored because the Fire Lightning stuff is so good. Round 2 was a win versus Soiree. I believe this was Jake Lee. If I remember correctly, it's hard to remember. But they actually ended up topping despite the loss to me. I don't remember too much about this game. It was really early in the day. I was still tired from driving in late. Round 3 was versus Ice Lightning. Remember this one pretty well because it didn't last very long. Turn 1 was Unileska. Turn 2, I played a backup. Turn 2, they went Zeromus, froze my backup. I went, crap. Okay, play a second backup. Turn 3, Laswell froze both of my backups, and I was like, oh, crap. Porum Orin, that'll stop them. Kuja. I was like, okay. I was never winning this one. This was a good one. So, that deck, I think, is actually the best Ice Lightning list I think I've ever seen. Having played against it now and seen what the cards are in it, I think that is one of the best Ice Lightning lists I've ever seen. I'm genuinely, it was, oh my gosh, I should have the name somewhere. Sherm is what I have written down. That was one of the best lists I think I've seen in the game. Like, that was a really clean Ice Lightning list. Super cool. Round 4 was versus the player that topped with Archfiends in Florida. And I saw the Archfiend come down, or the Golbez get warped, and I kind of laughed because that has been a pet deck of mine. I won locals even with this deck once. So I'm going to pull this out just to show this, but I am probably one of maybe 5 people at that venue that actually understood what Archfiends did and how they played. There's Golbez. That's Edge. So I play like Wind Lightning. I think it's like my favorite variant of it. He was on like a bit of a rainbow package for it. But I knew that deck. I knew its choke points, and I knew how to handle it. And he left because there were a lot of things that he wanted to do that I ended up just not letting him do. And really fun game, super nice. Again, one thing about this event, it was really well run. Every single player that was at the event was just incredibly nice. Just fantastic human beings all the way around. So we had our lunch break, and I came back. Shoutouts to all of the people from, I believe it was Minnesota. I'm so sorry. I should know your names. I think it was Kaz, right? Hung out with them, chatted about all kinds of stupid stuff. Got to kind of nerd out a little bit and be myself, which I love doing. Don't get me started talking about card games because I will not stop. I will talk your ear off. I apologize. So I come back from lunch, and round 5 was versus Fire Lightning 13. And in my little notes for this, I have a football because I punted this one. I straight up just had the win, and I said, I don't feel like winning. And I gave it to my opponent effectively. I had a Rydia and a Sildra with a Class Moogle backup. So I was going to go get a Fusoya, get back to the Amaterasu, an Amaterasu in my break zone, draw a card, power up Rydia to 4. All of a sudden now Lightning can't safely, you can't attack with the Lightning on field until you get a Fang because of the Amaterasu. And I searched 2 water cards. I searched a Porum, not keeping track of my hand size. And I was like, this is tournament, I can't take that back. So I straight up, I threw. Like, that was as hard of a throw as I could have done, but I said, okay, I have 2 matches still. If I win both of these, I'm in. So next round was a mirror. I was against a very similar deck list. And I had so much experience from playing my friend, playing the night before, playing with my playtest partners, that I knew the matchup pretty well. And I ended up getting ahead. It was kind of funny because they couldn't draw a Warrior of Light to save their life, and I couldn't draw a Summon. So we were both just like kind of digging to find the right answers. I got like 2 cards Hekka and another backup, or 2 backups Hekka and another card bounced. Fenrir came in absolute clutch. Just a monstrous performance from that card in that match. By the end of it, Fusoya sealed it up by being able to be cast every single turn for 5 CP, bouncing any backup my opponent would play and putting himself back on top of the deck. It was really stupid. So my opponent could never stick a backup, and they couldn't afford to wait for the Rydia and Wall on field to actually finish killing them. So finally, I get to the final round, and my opponent was oh my god, was it Aaron or Andrew? I think it was Aaron Wiseman was the first name. But I sit down, And I go, okay, what's my opponent on? And I'm like, yeah, so I get my mulligan and I play my first backup and I got a slow start. I don't have the colors in hand to get to get 3 backups down on turn 2, but I'm mostly fine. I've got access to everything I really need to play the game. And my opponent, I want to say, played a Sarah, and they pitched 6 CP Cloud, the Wind Lightning one. And I did a bit of a double take, and I was like, what is playing Sarah and Wind Lightning Cloud? And I went, oh no, this is Leo. Oh no. So now I've got a slow start against Leo, and Leo is very capable of doing its thing as early as like turn 4 and just start spinning the slot machine. I had no forward pressure, no damage pressure whatsoever at that point in the game. And this is my opponent made a couple mistakes, which, to be fair, I think some of the things that they didn't play around were kind of understandable. But I cast Fenrir 3 times and Sarah Mobius 4 times. Well, 2 times off of the Fenrir and 1 time by itself. Probably the game sealing play was when my opponent finally had to abandon Leo because of the 3 Fenrirs breaking all of his Sarahs. And he just went, okay, cool, I'll go Lena for Thancred. And then Thancred targeted Cloud. And he had killed my Sarah Mobius earlier in the turn with an Ash. So I managed to go Fenrir, bring back Sarah Mobius. Sarah Mobius made my Warrior of Light fight the Thancred and break Sarah in the backups. And all of a sudden now my opponent only controlled 5 water characters, and Thancred's effect fizzled. And that effectively sealed the game. It was, again, I think when I used to play Earthwind, I used to say that like the difference maker on how good a player was came down to how well they could use a Fiona. I think this is a similar type of card where you're only limited by your imagination and how well you can use this card. You can use it to sneak lethal with Sophie. It's extra copies of your Rydia, so you can go like Rydia with this, break it back up to kind of get yourself back in the lead, play a Porum to be ready with a Sildra. It's such a unique and flexible card. I'm very happy I didn't let one of my friends talk me off of playing it. So after that, I was exhausted. I took a nap, got dinner, went to bed early, and it was Top Cut time. And Top Cut was against Fire Lightning 13. It was open deck list, so we both knew everything the other player was up to. And if I could go back in time with a time machine and record that match, I absolutely would, because I think it was some of the most interesting Final Fantasy that I've ever seen. Which is weird, right? You would think like, oh, Fire Lightning 13's not like, it's boring aggro. They're going to try to run you down and that's it. But he knew that if he went too all in on the boring aggro, I had the answers in the Shantotos and the Hekkas, and he played it slow enough where those weren't sufficient, actually. I Hekka'd 2 times and Shantoto'd in Game 2 and still lost the game. Game 2 actually came down to deck out. Had a really, really nice double Imperilga to wipe a full Warrior of Light, Une, Rosa board at one point. Or no, Rosa wasn't on field. It was like everything except for Rydia, I want to say. And then like a really nasty Kuja timing to like pop the Rydia as well. Just super, super cool. Like maybe one of the most interesting sets of games. Like for reference, Top Cut, you have 70 minutes to play out your games. And I was thinking going into it, I'm like, well, it's Fire Lightning 13. These games will take about 10 minutes each. We started off with a time extension, and I don't think we really need a time extension. Just like, objectively speaking, these games should go by quick, and they did not. Those were exhausting. I feel kind of bad. I feel like I might have worn out my opponent before having to play Leo, which is a similarly exhaustive matchup. So, yeah, I really wished I could have like played that on stream or something just to like showcase how really interesting that gameplay was. And maybe that's something I'll do someday anyway, is just try to record some gameplay of like myself versus a good 13 player and show, from my perspective anyway, what I'm doing to try to survive in like what is honestly kind of a hell matchup for like a slow setup deck like this one, but how to actually like navigate it, I think it's really interesting. So yeah, big shout outs to all of my playtest partners, everyone from Red Rose and Hood's Claw are my two like biggest playtest partners. I think poor Hood's Claw had to talk me out of about 18 really terrible changes to the list. Things that would have hurt the consistency, trying to like save matchups that like I shouldn't have been focusing on and such. Red Rose is a really nice kind of grounding force. It's like, you know, you're doing good things. Why are you like so scared of things and everything else? And everyone in DFW is lovely, but especially McGinty. We had plenty of nights where we would just throw 10, 15 games at each other and try to figure out what cards did well and what matchups. Also, very huge shout outs to Lisa for just being kind of DFW's Final Fantasy TCG mom. She's the reason that like the community actually functions and gets anything done. Big shout outs to Strategic Gamer for more playtesting the night before the event. Or I guess 2 nights before the event, just running through a lot of scenarios and playing a deck that I hadn't had any playtest experience against and got to kind of learn how that matchup would play. And lastly, big thanks to Sam Prime, the eventual winner of the event. Actually had a lot of really valuable input on the list and helped kind of refine a lot of little details in it. So hopefully I get to showcase this again. I will be at San Diego, so you guys can definitely say hi to me there. I do not know what deck I will be playing. That's not even me trying to like hide it. There's a non-zero chance I literally pick up this exact 50, double sleeve it, and say, this is the deck. This is the deck. Never going to beat this deck. Nothing can be better. I think there's a non-zero chance of that happening. But we'll see. As soon as we get deck lists, I will have a full tourney report, much like I did for the Florida events, where I go over every single deck that made top cut, and I'll talk my thoughts through on them, kind of help everybody understand what I think was really interesting. Like I said, I thought that some of the Ice Lightning lists were just like unabashedly incredible lists. Like Sherm especially had, I think, one of the smartest lists I think I've ever seen in the game. I remember looking at it and going, what beats this deck? And I couldn't really think of one for a while. It took a long time to really think that like that deck looked just super, super solid. And yeah, I'll also try to record one for the event that took place in Europe. I didn't get a chance to watch the stream for that very much at all. Just wouldn't stay loaded on my phone. But I did see what won the event, what did well, and it'd be fun to go over that with y'all. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll put the deck list in the description for y'all, and I will see y'all next time.